This is an RNZ podcast.
No mai, whakaronga mai ki te Altai whenua. Welcome to Country Life. I'm Sally Round.
Great to have your company. I'm Duncan Smith. Today, we catch up with a collector of rare and exotic sheep breeds who recently sold part of his farm and along with it, his flock.
Antique farming books and detailed weather records help a Taranaki farmer make the absolute most of his prize Jersey cows.
And we head out with a Gisborne country vet on his rounds back in 1975.
But first, to a roundup of news from RNZ's Rural News Team, and Sally Murphy joins us from Ōtautahi Christchurch. And global dairy prices have continued to rise this week, Sally.
They have. The average price rose 1.7% at the Global Dairy Trade auction this week. It followed a 3.3% rise at the last one, and this is the fifth consecutive auction where prices have risen since March. Rising dairy prices has led Taupō-based milk processor Miraka to release a strong opening forecast milk price for the new season. At $8.42 a kilo of milk solids, it's a tad higher than Fonterra's opening forecast of $8.
But things are looking less rosy for dairy company Synlait.
They are. Synlait has told the Australian Stock Exchange that a significant majority of its 400 suppliers will leave the company in 2026. This follows a first half loss of $96 million announced in April and a downgraded earnings outlook. Canterbury farmer Willie Lefrink supplies milk to Synlait, and he says its advanced milk solids price has often been $1 behind Fonterra, something that must change.
They'll have to perform really well now because they burned quite a few bridges. Predicament they're in is not that nice. Not all their own fault. Some of the stuff is outside their control, like A2 not being able to supply China for a while. You know, I have a lot of sympathy for the current management because they dealt a very difficult task.
Now, pretty grim prices there for sheep farmers in Hawke's Bay.
Yes, prices for inland ewes at a recent sale dropped to their lowest level in at least a decade. Top prices were down about 66% compared to last year. PGG Wrightson's Hawke's Bay livestock manager Neil Common says auctioneers struggled to get $100 for a pregnant ewe.
So pretty tough work trying to sell Scandinavian lamb ewes. People tending to put on more cattle where possible rather than ewes at the present.
But there's been some good progress in a new sideline for wool growers.
There has. Biotech company Keraplast, which extracts proteins from sheep wool, has opened new premises in Christchurch. Keraplast extracts naturally occurring keratin proteins from coarse wool to put into products like skin, hair and nail care, which it sells worldwide. Chief Executive Howard Moore says the existing sector's growing, with new areas for using wool-based proteins opening up.
So last year we processed almost 100 tonnes of strong wool. If that wool had been exported, it would have generated less than $500,000 in export revenue. But by converting it into keratin ingredients, last year it generated a revenue of over $10 million. So it's a great added value story for New Zealand.
And the global market is expected to be worth more than $2.5 billion by 2031.
Now, things are also coming along swimmingly for a new salmon hatchery trial.
They are. NZ King Salmon is trialling a new salmon rearing system which uses less water by recycling it. Fish welfare manager Dr. Zach Waddington says trials have shown the fish grow better and have better health outcomes in recirculating aquaculture systems like this.
With new consents, including one that we've recently gained for Blue Endeavour, which is an open ocean site. So if all things go well, then our company is looking to expand and we will need increased hatchery supply. And given the limited availability of freshwater resources, we want to make sure that we're utilizing those as efficiently as possible.
Now, sticking with fish, Hawke's Bay fishers are dealing with a prickly problem, Sally.
They are. This is an odd one. They're catching thousands of porcupine fish, otherwise known as blowfish. Fishers like Rick Birch have put it down to an odd side effect of Cyclone Gabrielle. He's been operating in Hawke's Bay since 1987 and says before the cyclone he'd catch the odd porcupine fish, but nothing like now.
In Hawke's Bay and the surrounding areas, the number of porcupine fish have increased amazingly. For example, on my last trip, which consisted of 10 trawl tows, we caught 773 kilos of porcupine fish. And this was recorded for Fish Serve in my catch returns.
Now, Sally, you've heard about some admin problems deer farmers have been having.
Yes, well, farmers are legally required to tag and register livestock through the National Animal Identification and Tracing System, also known as NAIT. However, Deer Industry New Zealand says some of its farmers have had issues with the software when animals they've registered show up as unregistered. Chair Mandy Bell says if incorrect data goes through to the Ministry for Primary Industries, farmers can be charged for non-compliance.
There's a disconnect in that when the inaccuracy is noted, it will be seen on the Osprey system. They will notify MPI, and MPI will then send a charge out to the farmer because an animal might be deemed to not have a tag. Actually, it has happened on farm, but the system is not recording this as it should do.
Just staying on that topic of compliance, Sally, there's good news around a levy on dairy farmers.
Yes, progress on eradicating Mycoplasma bovis from herds means the levy set up to pay for this has been reduced. There are currently no infected properties in New Zealand, so Dairy NZ is reducing the biosecurity response levy.
And lastly, a Northland school's gardening project's grown beyond their imagination.
It has. Kaio School's foray into cultivation has produced a bumper kumara crop for the children to share with their local community. Principal Paul Barker says the wider community benefits while the students learn new skills.
There were some amazingly sized kumara and some odd-shaped ones as well. Oh, well, it just fits in with our overall school ethos. We work on four main words. One is learn, one is love, one is contribute, and one is grow.
And that's the Rural News Wrap this week.
Thanks, Sally.
This is Country Life on RNZ National 101 FM.
There may be 4.6 sheep for every person in New Zealand, but not all sheep are the same, as this week's guest will tell you. Brian Hales has spent the last few years amassing a collection of rare and exotic sheep breeds on his farm in Wimbledon, Tararua district. From breeds unique to Aotearoa, like the rare Arapawa sheep found on an island in the Marlborough Sounds, to Swedish Gotlands and the versatile caracals of Kazakhstan. With Brian having recently sold much of his farm, Janina Schwanecker asked what was happening to his flock.
I'm Brian Hales. I live at Wimbledon. Wimbledon, for those of you who don't know it, is a small village, and it is situated 65 k's east of Dannevirke and 65 k's east of Waipakarau. It is 6 kilometres from the coast being Herbertville or Cape Turn again.
Brian, can you tell me why you started collecting exotic and rare breeds of sheep?
Well, it started about 15 years ago, I suppose, and my brother, Nigel, he managed a wool scour, huge wool scour in Kazakhstan, and the wool that they scoured there mostly was caracal wool, and he found great value in this wool, and then when he returned to New Zealand, we actually managed to locate 6 caracal sheep, 5 ewes and a ram. We acquired their sheep and we bred from them. And at that stage, I'd have been farming here for probably 40-odd years. I was looking for something to give me a little bit more inspiration from what I was doing. So I looked after these. I treasured these sheep. And then it became a bit of a fascination. I acquired a Gotland sheep, a line of Gotlands, and that was pretty interesting. And then some Arapara Island sheep and something else. It was like collecting stamps. It went on and on and on. And I would think that over the years I've ended up with about 20, 25 breeds of sheep. Normally have about 20 at a time. I have up to 300 exotic sheep on my hands at a time. As well, I also have my commercial flock of about 1,200 Romney ewes and about 100 cows.
And now, Brian, you have sold your collection of sheep and a large part of the farm, I understand.
Yes, the grazing land of our farm has been sold for pine trees, and along with that goes I've had to sell the exotic sheep.
So what's happened to your flock now? Have they all found new homes?
Yes, I had a sale in Dannevirke just a few weeks ago, and we sent in 90 sheep, and 70 of those sold, and they all went to good homes. I'm confident of that. And also the 20-odd that I brought back, plus a few others that I have back here that I didn't keep, that I've held back from the sale. I've still got 120-odd acres, so yeah, some of those will survive here.
You mentioned a couple of different sheep breeds there. Can you tell me a little bit about some of their characteristics and maybe your favourite sheep breed?
Possibly every breed is a favourite. If I was to have a favourite sheep, it would certainly be the caracal sheep. It's the oldest breed of sheep known to man, has the fat tail, was present when Jesus was born, everything like that. Brilliant history behind it. It belongs in the desert, the desert dwellers, and they get all their needs supplied to them from the caracal sheep. They can felt the wool to make their tents. They can use the little trimmings to stuff their saddles with. They can make their clothing out of it. They can eat the meat. They can milk the sheep. They use the bones for tent pegs. So the caracal sheep is a brilliant sheep in terms of its supplying human needs. Certainly a versatile animal. Yeah.
I imagine, Brian, that you've seen a lot of changes in your time as a sheep and beef farmer here in New Zealand, particularly with wool.
Yes.
What do you think we can learn from some of the exotic or rarer breeds that you've had?
There was a breed of sheep known as the Drysdale. Everybody will be familiar with the Drysdale, and Drysdale wool was essential in carpet manufacturing to dye. You can dye it to use it in carpet, and that was a very, very popular breed of sheep, and that was only 25 years ago, I suppose. It might be 30 years ago. But all of a sudden, carpet lost its place, and so the Drysdale sheep disappeared. So the sheep are determined upon the economics of the time. I am a bit concerned as to what might be happening now, that some of our good pasture land may be going into trees, and so the sheep needs are being pushed to more remote areas, and these could be offshore islands or higher up mountains to where it's colder and snowier. And so therefore sheep like the Campbell Island sheep that are used to the sub-Antarctic islands could have values of their own because they have the ability to withstand the cold. So there are things that we can just keep in reserve for the future.
And are there any particular sheep that you will miss, I suppose?
Possibly the caracals. They were a good talking point. There's millions of talking points about the caracals, but they were so hard to look after. I think the interaction between people will miss the most, rather than the actual keeping of the sheep, the sharing of knowledge, the exchange of ideas, and that sort of thing.
That was Brian Hales speaking to Janina Schwanecker.
South Taranaki dairy farmer Cliff Shearer loves to see his dairy herd from the big windows in his living room. Just over the fence, they were lolling in the shade of some tall trees when I arrived one day in late summer. We start off inside, though, to find out about Cliff's passion for collecting vintage books about farming in days gone by.
These are my pride and joy.
Look at those books, all stacked.
Those are old farming books.
How old?
The oldest one's 1798.
What's that one about?
Observations on livestock.
And there's Cliff Shearer trawls online for antiquarian books like this. He also collects old Jersey cow production registers and herd books. He says reading them reaffirms the trials and experiences he's had in more than 40 years of milking Jersey cows.
1798, they were all longhorns and shorthorns were just starting. So it was written by the first Minister of Agriculture that England ever had, who was a student of Robert Bakewell, who was the greatest cattle breeder in history and founded the modern system of animal breeding.
Books like this one confirm practices he's found works, like always breeding your best cow to the best bull, or spreading dolomite on the pasture to prevent mastitis.
So these are my herd books, which is every cow registered back to 1902 when Jersey New Zealand started. So I use these all the time to look up pedigrees, research them and everything. That's sort of one of my hobbies, if you like. I look up pedigrees for people all around the world that want to know New Zealand Jersey ancestry. So they get used a lot.
Cliff loves books and record keeping, and it's a lot of the reason why he lays claim to have the highest producing Jersey herd in New Zealand. We've just come into your paddock of beautiful Jersey cows. They're lying down and they're enjoying the shade, aren't they?
Yes, underneath the shade of the trees.
Do you think they'll be nervous of me and my microphones?
They're used to visitors. I get quite a lot of people coming to look at the cows, so get Jersey Club groups and organic farming groups and things come to visit, and people individually come and look at the cows too, so it's always nice to show your cows off.
Well, your cows are pretty famous and your herd is pretty famous, Cliff. Tell us a little bit about it.
I've got the highest producing Jersey herd in New Zealand history. My cows average 701 kilos of milk solids, and they've done over 650 for the last 14 years.
And just put that in perspective.
The average cow in New Zealand does about 360 kilos of milk solids, so nearly double the New Zealand average. And I've got Jerseys, so their live weight is about 450 kilos each, so they do produce about 150% of their live weight in milk solids. And the New Zealand average is about 85%. So, yeah, they're good producing cows.
How big is the herd?
About 30 cows.
And it's not a big farm, is it?
I've got 35 acres, about 7 acres fenced off for riparian and trees. So 28 acres or so for the cows to milk on. This farm was settled as a dairy farm in 1861 from the Redoubt here, and as far as we know, it's only been owned by 2 families. It's the original pasture. It's never been undersown or oversown or ploughed up or anything. So it's all old grasses. I haven't put any fertiliser on since 1983, so 41 years of no fertiliser and no weed spraying. My method of weed control is topping, which I do 6 or 7 times a season. Topping is cutting all the weeds off so they fall back onto the pasture, which is a 2-system benefit. It's one, that you stop the weeds from seeding, and 2, the weed that falls down protects the pasture from drying out in the summer so that it stays greener than what it does if it's just a bare pasture. And also it builds the humus level in the soil, which allows you to grow more grass.
And of course you have the trees as well.
And the trees send roots down into the ground, and the leaves go up with the minerals that they get, and then the leaves fall off out into the paddocks and free fertiliser.
That must save you some money.
It's a win-win. Wanted to show you this cow down here, which you can't see because we're on the radio, but she's the highest producing cow that I've ever had. I bought her last year.
Hello, darling.
She's done 1,062 kilos of milk solids, over 10,000 litres.
10,000 litres?
In 300 days.
In 300 days. So imagine 10,000 bottles of milk, the old-fashioned style, in 300 days.
Yes, in 10 months. Over 30 bottles of milk a day. But she was actually the highest priced Jersey in New Zealand last year. I paid $10,200 for her. She is an embryo imported from the United States, which I always wanted to milk one of those to see how they would go in my system. So when the opportunity came to buy her, I bought her, and she's been really, really good. There's an aerodrome 2 paddocks away. So I've got about 200 fruit trees all scattered around here. I think every farm should have more fruit trees. If you plant a tree, you might as well plant something that looks pretty and has something that you can eat as well. I don't know why there's not more fruit trees all around the place.
I must say these cows seem to be enjoying being in the shade as well.
Especially in the summer. Shade is very important.
Let's talk about this herd of yours, because it is, apart from being very high producing, you have your own technique of breeding.
I started farming in 1979 and started buying some pedigree Jersey cows then. In 1980, I bought the cow that my whole herd goes back to, a cow called Lamorna Rovers Brenda. And she had 8 daughters, all of which I milked here, and my entire herd now traces back to some of those 8 daughters, which is 44 years later. But I've also line bred them by using sons of cows that come from that family. So that's all of the names of the animals in that family start with C. So it's my C family. So the bulls all start with C as well. So I've used about 600 C names up now, and I'm recycling them because I'm getting old and it's hard to think of new C names.
And some of the, now at the moment you don't have a bull on the property, you still have frozen semen going back quite a way.
Yes, I've collected straws from my bulls virtually from the start, and I still use some of those older bulls just to see how they do these days and what they're like.
While we're talking, I have got one of your beautiful jerseys sniffing my hat. Hello.
That's Cloak. Cloak got second prize at the Hara Jersey Club show last month for a 3-year-old cow. And her mother, Clock, was the reserve champion at that show about 5 years ago. So she's one of my nice show cows. So they all have a 3-barreled name. They're all Glenbrook, and then they've got the bull's name in the middle and then a C name after it. So this one that's also sniffing you is Glenbrook Carpe Diem Sal. Carpe Diem is one of the best bulls that I bred. Just about every cow in the herd's got him as a sire or a grandsire now.
Well, they're all prize cows, aren't they?
They are to me.
You said they're like family.
They are. They're born here and they grow up their whole lives as part of my family, so we're family. But Glenbrook Cato Creation is my first ever champion cow at the Hara Jersey Club show this year, and I've waited 45 years to have a champion cow. I started showing cows in 1979, the first year I brought cows, and honestly I thought that I wasn't going to ever get a champion cow. So I was really rapt to get champion last month, and I'm still rapt about it now. It's a club with a lot of very good herds and very good breeders. It's a hard contest to win, so we're all delighted when we do win.
It's not all about productivity then?
No, this is just purely type, and it's just what they look like on the day. It's nothing to do with the production.
And what is the best type? What is a beautiful Jersey? What is it that sets her apart?
Mostly udder. The shape of their udder is the thing that they mostly look for. That's where all the milk comes from, so you want the perfect shape to put the cups on easily, so that the cow can walk around without any difficulties. You don't want her udder dragging on the ground, obviously, things like that. For me, I prefer my cows to have lots of meat over their bones, and I think if you can keep them in good condition all the time, they produce more, they get in calf easier, and they're happier. So I have my cows probably fatter than most people do.
Cliff, shall we go and have a look at where you do the milking?
Yep.
We head out of the home paddock and down the track, past a large herd home, calf pens and an effluent pond. The shed, like the herd, is tiny, pristine and, well, old school. Now this is a little bit special. Like your herd.
I built a walk-through cowshed in 1982, possibly one of the last walk-through cowsheds built in the country. Walk-throughs were the first cowsheds that were in New Zealand in the 1880s onwards, where the cows had an individual bale and you let them out and they walked through the front and went down the farm.
Most people nowadays have herringbone or rotary sheds, where the milking team are down in a pit below the cows. But Cliff's shed is a simple setup with stalls side by side. He moves between them, sitting on a stool as he puts the cups on, and milks each cow single-handedly.
So the walk-through is a very old-fashioned shed, but since my cows like it and they produce more than any other Jersey cows in New Zealand, I think it works still.
I see a blackboard here with lots of figures.
I love information. I love statistics and figures, so I've put all of my production records and herd tests on the walls of my cow shed as well as everywhere else. Just so I can keep track of it. I can look up and see what the cows did in a March herd test last year or a March herd test 20 years ago or 30 years ago, just out of interest to see how they track other years. I keep all the rainfall records. I've got rainfall records for this farm back to 1965 when my parents bought it, which is very interesting to see how that changes over time.
Just next door to the dairy shed, in the dark and cool, a shiny vessel containing this morning's produce.
This is the vat room. My vat is an old flip-top vat, that was me opening it, that holds 1,700 litres, which makes it one of the smallest vats that's supplying the industry today. And this vat was actually made in 1965, and Fonterra have told me that it's the oldest vat still supplying milk in Taranaki by a good 10 years.
And it still looks pretty shiny and new to me.
And it's still good old-fashioned stainless steel, so it still works, it still does what it's supposed to do.
We're looking inside and there's a beautiful creamy top to that milk.
Cream. The cows at the moment are running about a 6.3% fat test and a 4.4% protein test, so it's very rich Jersey milk.
Is that despite the lack of rain?
Yes, well, they're only doing 20 litres a cow at the moment, so that's lower than what they'd be doing if we had a lot of grass.
So it's kind of concentrated?
Yes, it's more concentrated.
It smells pretty good. So what is the minimum herd number that you can supply and be commercially viable?
Fonterra's minimum pickup is 400 litres of milk a load, which can be every second day. But you've also got to do 15,000 kilos of milk solids a year, so you possibly need at least 30 cows to cover both of those bases. So you probably couldn't supply with less than 30 good cows.
And if you've got a really good producing herd like you do, you can easily do it.
Most of the year. It gets hard at some times of the year in the winter when I'm not milking many cows. I just got to make sure I've got enough to stay over that 400 litres.
Now, you're a sole milker. You don't have any help here.
Yes,
how do you manage?
You just get out of bed every morning and go and do it, because you know if you don't, nobody else is going to. So I've done 14 years without missing a milking since the 1st of March 2010, which is some 10,250 consecutive milkings twice a day. I've done it when I haven't been very well. I've done it with 6 broken ribs, which was very painful for a few months. You just got to carry on. The day that I don't want to get out of bed and milk the cows is probably the day that I'll retire. I still want to do it. I still love doing it. So,
what is it about it that you love?
Just farming in general that I love. It's everything about farming. I don't know exactly how to put it into words, but...
And the actual milking side of it, does it not get too routine and boring?
No, that's the side of it I love. I like the milking side of it because I like the records and the production and seeing how much milk's in the vat after each milking and how much milk each cow's giving, and that's my reason for getting out of bed. That's what I get up for, to break records, if you like. That's my passion, my goals, my being.
Cliff Shearer talking to me at Glenbrook, the home of his Jersey herd in South Taranaki. Cliff's taking a rest at the moment by only milking half the herd before heading into the next season. He's just been through the second longest dry spell since 1965, and in the last 12 months, rainfall was down 40% on the average. But productivity-wise, Cliff's herd was only 1% down on last year. It's due to phasing out calf rearing, so he can stay farming as he gets older.
Hi, it's Jess here from Dreamview Creamery. We sell milk in reusable glass bottles. You're listening to Country Life, RNZ National.
One from the vaults now. An episode of the much-loved and missed RNZ series Spectrum. Producer Elwyn Owen joins country vet Mac Wallace on a day's fieldwork near Gisborne. The first job is helping out with a dairy cow having a bit of trouble delivering its calf.
It's a pity you picked one of the wettest days of spring to come out with me. We're going to get a little bit damp.
Well, what effect will that have on your work here?
Or just that we get more dirty work. No, the point is in this sort of weather, cows seem to have more trouble calving. In fine weather, they pop them out, no trouble at all. But as soon as it starts to rain, well, they get trouble. And of course, everybody gets wet and dirty. Well, there's our patient.
What's the routine then?
Bucket of water, put in some disinfectant. Take a watch off first. And then have a feel around and see what's going on. See what it's going to be. Well, you'll notice that Robert has been having a go. He's got a couple of bits of nylon rope tied onto something here. Probably a couple of front feet that he's been able to find, but not the head, so we're going to have to dive in there and see what we can do about that.
Mac, this is rather like lambing on a larger scale.
Yes, actually, it's a bit easier because a bit more room. Mm-hmm. Lambing sometimes get a little bit tight, you see. You've got a normal-sized hand, it's a bit hard to get in there. But calving's usually is a bit more room. She looks like well, she's not a first calver, she could be a second or third calver, so she's not going to be too difficult. Dairy sheds is always a good supply of hot water. Some of these jobs on the beef places, there's no water for miles from the yards.
She doesn't seem distressed on it anyway.
Oh, she's pushing a bit, but she's not really worried. As long as she doesn't go down into the pit. These herringbone sheds are not quite so easy to work in as the old walk-through types. They're a hell of a lot easier for the farmers to milk cows in, but any sort of treating feet or calving, it's just get a little bit awkward.
You don't have much room there, do you?
Well, you'll notice how our ass is jammed up against that post, you see. We're going to have to sort of push her forward and turn her around. Get it parallel with the rate. Well, now, I'll just walk around the other side. His pit, as you notice, is full of a fine solution there. Then a well-organised sort of a farmer, Robert has taken the opportunity to go and have some breakfast, you see. He'll no doubt turn up when we've got the bloody calf out.
2 chains, what are they for?
Well, those bits of chain are very easy to position inside the cow. All I'm going to do is try and hook one around its head, you see. His bits of rope are probably going to be all right on there, so it's just a matter of getting in there. Look, I'm going to get a bit more cold water in this. It's too warm. Morning, Roberto. How are you?
That's a big calf, eh?
Looks like it. Have you found his nose?
Everything's ready. I had a look last night. I thought she'd be all right, but she wasn't. It's alive too, eh?
Oh, well, stick her in. I'm trying to get my hand in there. Robert, do you mind getting around there and pushing her ass over this way so we can just sort of get her straightened up a little? Well, now you see the trick with these sort of jobs is to get the nose coming out just above the toes. Because if you don't, the whole thing gets larger. If you pull the feet without pulling the head, you're going to make it make the overall diameter bigger. So the idea is to catch that head, pull it out with the toes, which is quite often a little bit easier said than done. And this is one of those cases where it is. You've got to drop the chain over behind his ears, you see. And he's not being very happy about it.
How many of these do you get in the course of a season?
Too many. Actually, we don't get a hell of a lot of dairy here at all, man. How many dairy farmers are there?
Oh, in Gisborne, I think now, Townsbride is about 18. Yeah, just Gisborne.
Nowhere near the sort of work you'd get at a full dairy practice. And now got to undo that knot, you see, and slide it forward. You don't want to have a lasso type of loop. You want something that's going to stop, otherwise you choke him. You want to get it about under his chin if you can. Okay, look, come out here and grab these hands. You go back to the end of that rope. See? Hook it over the top of the beam there. That's the stuff. Go around again, so you've got to have turn around, full turn around, that's the stuff. So yeah, take it up as I sit on the rope. And again.
Now getting an upward pull there.
No,
is that the idea?
It's a downward pull, but the end of the rope has got to be tightly held, otherwise all you're doing is pulling.
Now, one end of the rope is attached to the calf and the other to a beam. The cow can't move, so if Max sits down on the rope, the leverage should ease the calf out.
Well, this is why it's such hard work. Now, don't let us slide over. The main thing is that we keep applying their weight.
Well, something's coming. We can see the head now.
Oh, a very swollen tongue, you notice?
Yes.
He's a big calf and he's been trying to come out for a while and he's been having trouble. Now, can you take that up as I sit up? You all right?
Yep.
The idea is that you try and apply the traction in the direction of the calf normally sort of drops.
Yes.
You certainly don't want to pull up and go sort of down. Now, all that head's come through there quite well. All we've got to do now is just keep
well, the head's out, and out she comes. Like shelling peas, man.
I don't know about that. She probably thinks it's more like pink shell.
That's the calf, all right?
Yeah, we've had a wee bit of a stick up with her hips, but she's right.
Oh, there we are.
Now, that's a mighty big calf.
It's a big calf, all right? A little bull calf, eh?
Big bull calf.
Yeah, big bull.
Well, the Charolais boys are having a lot of bull calves this year. One bloke told me he was on 23 calves and about 20 of them were bulls. They, of course, want all the heifers they can get. Now, where would you like that calf put to?
Oh, I'll put it out. I'll take it out front of her and then she'll get out there.
Well, there's nothing else I want to do at the moment, excepting if she doesn't clean, give us a yell in about 3 or 4 days. Okay?
She's sound, Morty.
Good. Open your gate and we'll let her out. Gonna be all right as long as he hits a bit of grass. Trying to stand up on the concrete yards, they hurt themselves. They just don't succeed so well. Coming out this way.
Yep.
Mac, you enjoy this sort of work, obviously.
I enjoy it. It's pleasant. We're, I think, reasonably well paid these days. And you get all the exercise you want. And it involves, you might say, the whole man. You've got to think and you've got to work sometimes quite hard too. So I enjoy it.
How do you look on animals yourself, Mac? Do you call yourself an animal lover at all?
Well, I have a sort of respect for animals, I'd say. I don't class myself as an animal lover because I don't like people that love animals. They prove to be very difficult to deal with and rather a source of embarrassment. They will make such a hell of a fuss about a small dog or, in some cases, a cat. You feel, in this case, that you're treating the person and not the animal. In most cases like this, it's the sort of job I don't like anyway. But I've got a great respect for cattle, bulls, horses, particularly. I'd say I like horses. I wouldn't say I love them, but I like them. They don't win when I want them to, but they're nice animals to deal with. I think it's probably because they're pretty stupid animals, and you know exactly what they're going to do before they know what they're going to do. It's nice to meet a chappie who can handle horses to deal with them. Now, in this district, there's 2 or 3 blokes who are outstanding in this respect. Ray Reichenbach's one of them. His way with horses is, to me, it's just ideal. He tells them to stand up, and they stand up. Some of the roughies, of course, up the coast, they make life interesting. But horses, in by and large, the animals I prefer to play around with.
Well, that's one down for the day, Matt.
Yeah, well, now going to see a cow that may have dislocated a leg or broken a leg. Another dairy cow around at Eric Cameron's place, so hop in and we're off.
As it turns out, there isn't much Mac can do for Eric Cameron's limping cow. He diagnoses a bruised shoulder that will probably heal with time, and makes a booking to pregnancy diagnose some cows. And then it's on to Ray Reichenbach's Aintree stud to look at a foal with the scours and a mare well past her foaling date. The rain has eased, and skylarks salute the sun as Ray leads us across to the fold.
That's another Duncan, is it?
He's only born on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
He looks pretty right, but he was scouring so badly yesterday, and he's only 3 days old.
Uh-huh.
Now, you're going to smell catching. He wasn't drinking particularly well after either.
Wait, stand still. Come on now, just relax. You're all right. Oh, you've really been a very watery sort of scan.
Yes.
Okay.
So I thought we'd better do something pretty quick and
Well,
lively.
give him... You gave him 1.5.
Yes. No, tip it. Take that out and tip it in that way.
Oh, shit,
it's much easier.
You'll be right.
He did get a bit spilt yesterday when we were tipping it down his throat. He didn't get a hell of a lot. That's why we gave him 1.5 rather than just...
Yeah, well, what is this anyway? Oh, that's a 35. You could do with 1.5, yeah. Size he is. Come on, maybe.
But he's brightened himself. But at this age, it's best to do something for them before something happens. We gave him injections so he doesn't get any complications.
Come, mate. Do a bit of swallowing, eh? Yes, sir, boy.
What are you giving him, Mac?
It's a combination of sulfonylamides, antibiotics, kaolin and pectin, which has got all the things in that are supposed to stop a young animal from scouring. Which you've got to do with a young foal like this, otherwise they get very dehydrated. Like you say, he doesn't get a whole lot of it, does he?
No, sir. How did the bridge go last night? Rotary, was it?
Rotary first, yes. Bridge afterwards.
Oh, yes.
I think we might have done rather well.
Oh, very good. I suppose this will be a free consultation this morning. There's my pony Stallion's girlfriend over the fence there. He loves it. Piebald pony.
Oh, yeah.
I think she's beautiful.
She is, too. Mm. Come on, have him right again.
Keeps him happy. And...
I'll have another drop of this stuff. It's good for you. Come on, sucker. Doesn't taste like milk, boy, but it's good for you.
I thought Caresta would fold during the night. She's been waxed up for 2 days. That's all set?
Yeah, that's all. Let him go.
Still hasn't, but never mind. Wait a minute. Well, I'll put to have a look at Light Salute. She's got an udder. She's due to fall on the 2nd of September, and her udder on one side's quite large and quite small on the other side, and she's just a few days off by the look of it, so we'll check that one out.
Have a look at it, good.
Before you go.
The mare's okay, Mac decides. She'll probably foal tonight. There's time to admire Duncan Junction, standing at Aintree, and then we're off to Tipuru. Sheep now for a change. Stock manager Selwyn Scudder has 300-odd rams waiting in the shed here. A good shed, too, with a fully equipped kitchen and a piano even. Food for the shearers' souls as well as their stomachs. But it's not the long grind of a shearing day that brings us here, but rather Mac's 4th job of the morning. An hour's energetic work, jabbing a needle into Colin Williams' rams.
Well, what we got here is 300 Perrendale rams, which we're going to vaccinate against epididymitis due to brucella. It affects rams by causing inflammation of the epididymis, which is the tube that carries the spermatozoa away from the testes, and they get a very fibrous condition known as epididymitis of either one or both testicles. It's not an uncommon disease in rams. Epididymitis can be caused by other bacteria, but this is about the only one you can do anything about. So we like to make sure that the rams are vaccinated before they go out with the ewes. Righto, well, we'll go and get in. Righto, Selwyn, how many have you got here?
About 340.
And just as well, I bought a bit of extra dope then. Are we right? As you can see, they're very vigorous little rams.
Just shove it in the flank and squeeze.
Yep.
Well, Mac, 11 o'clock and 4 jobs done. But
Yeah,
you were
well,
on
it's
the...
not bad going, is it?
It's not bad going, but you were on the job before we came along, weren't you,
Oh,
this morning?
yes, I had a calving at 7 o'clock, one of those Charolais jobs for Johnny Kinder. It was a big calf, but it was coming backwards, so we managed to get it out without too much trouble.
Well, if all this is very much routine, what are some of the oddities you come up against, Mac?
The oddest thing, I think, was this tranquilizing gun that we bought. We had an American chap come over from Atlanta City, Red Palmer, and he had an excellent tranquilizing gun. He used a drug called Sernalan, which was very effective indeed. As soon as it hit the beast, it started to lie down, and it was on the deck in about 2 minutes. So we bought one of these guns, and I was rather surprised to find we didn't have very much use for it. However, one day a bloke rang up, and he had a bull over the back of his farm in the next door neighbour's bush, and he wanted to get this bull out. They hadn't been able to succeed with the usual shotgun and horses and dogs, and he thought if the bull was tranquilised, he'd be easier to get through this gate and onto his own farm. So I got on a horse and took my gun with me, got up the top of this hill, and there was about 300 acres of tea tree and scrub. And he stood around about 10 yards from me in among some tea tree, tall tea tree. So I shot him with the tranquilising dart and happily told the owner to roll himself a smoke, and then we'd walk him through the gate. Which he did, and as the bull walked through the gate, I was looking for my dart. It was, I thought, in his flank. There was no sign of it. And I realised that I'd probably missed the bull and hit a tea tree stump, and it was the farmer's confidence which got the bull out of the paddock, not the tranquiliser. That's the sort of thing that, can happen. But the oddest thing really shows, it didn't happen to me, it happened to one of our other veterinary surgeons here. He was called out to a calving. And when he got there, people were standing around a bit, and the calf had a couple of bits of baling twine tied onto its front legs. Now, obviously, they'd been having a go, but they hadn't done much good. It was a beef cow, and it was in a race with a post, one of these 4-inch pine posts stuck in behind it to keep it up the race. And so our friend got stripped off and got into the job, and after about half an hour's work, he managed to extract this calf. And then the people said, oh, well, now we can take Mum to hospital. And the vet inquired, what's happened to Mum? And then they showed him her hand, and during the course of her attempts to extract this calf, her fingers had become entangled with the baling twine, and the cow had lurched forward, and she'd chopped the end of her middle finger of her left hand off, which was recovered at a later stage, but I'll tell you about that. So the vet said, right, well, off she goes quickly, you'd better get her up to hospital. So father and mother hop in their car, and off they go. The neighbour who was there to help suddenly had a thought that perhaps this finger might be of some assistance to the surgeon, so he said to John, where's the finger? They pulled it out of the bottom of the race, which wasn't in a very hygienic condition, put it in a plastic bag after washing it in some Savlon, and the friend or neighbour hopped into his car and hastened in towards the Cook Hospital with this finger in a plastic bag. He didn't know, but halfway into the hospital, the first family had run out of juice, and they were on the side of the road, but he passed them at about 70 and didn't see them, frantically waving him down. So he arrived at the hospital with a finger but no patient to go with it. About 20 minutes later, the family arrived with the lady there with the end of the finger missing. The surgeon in charge of the case took one look at the plastic bag and said no, he didn't think that would survive its experience. So he patched up the end of the lady's finger, and she's still today missing the last joint of the middle finger of the left hand. Which goes to show you how concerned some people are for their animals' welfare.
That story about Gisborne country vet Mac Wallace is from the archives and was produced in 1975 by Elwyn Owen for the long-running RNZ series Spectrum. And thanks to Ngā Taonga Sound and Vision for that audio.
That's it for now. Thanks for joining us. We love getting your feedback, so do send it in. And send in any ideas for future stories to us here at Country Life. Our email address is country@rnz.co.nz. You can follow and listen to Country Life wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed the podcast, we'd love you to give us a plug on social media or tell a friend about this show. Just click the share button in the app to send this episode to a friend.
And the stories in this episode were produced and presented by Elwyn Owen, Sally Round and Janina Schwanecker. And in the studio production team today, David Knowles and Phil Benj. Catch you next time.
Ka kite.